we will start this. And thank you all very much indeed for joining another Advertising Matters Views from the front line. We're always floored by the growing interest and the personal contact, and I do get a lot of that after the event. So please keep that up. And thanks for attending today. Next week we have Jane McDade, who's the founder of Think House, which is a very young, groovy PR agency. Mick McCaffrey, who's head of news and sport. Well, he's probably just head of news at the moment because there is no sport on Virgin Media Television. And we also have Luke Reaper, who's the MD at Behaviour and Attitudes, who've done some great work on consumer behaviours and reactions to brand during COVID. So that would be worthwhile. I will rattle through some housekeeping, as I always have to do, because everybody says, I see you're recording it, but are you recording us? We're not recording you. You can smoke, you can drink, you're muted, we can't see you ironing, but you can relax, watch, listen, and hopefully you find it helpful. There are no emergency exits. If you find a life jacket under your seat, be very concerned. We'll poll you at the end, and as I always say, if the results are any good, we'll share them, and if they're not, I won't. But this is about getting a real sense of community. We also send out a recording of it as well to, we've 97 subscribers today. So we'd send a recording, but I was there in the 2010 crash. If I can ever help you, don't hesitate. This is about building a community. So if you have anything here to say or want me to promote or advertise shamelessly, we will do that. And there is talk, surprise to Jack McGee now, of people looking for a party, or well, not a party, sorry, I beg your pardon, a business networking event after this is all over. So we might think about a venue and do that. Just with that in mind, Ciara Sheehan, Orb Media, ORB Media.ie, and we're in video. I've seen the work she does, VR 360, immersive type videos, really worth a look. So there's an ad. I would recommend it because it is pretty striking stuff. My name is Stuart Fogarty. I'm of Admatic AdTech, who builds media booking engines for media owners for direct business. Also AFAO'Meara advertising, which is doing very little at the moment. And indeed Streamabout video agency. But my job is really just to keep this going and to try and moderate it as best you can. It is very much appreciated that you're here, and I really hope it's of benefit. And it will be over in an hour and 5 minutes because we started a little bit late. Again, as you can see, I'm in the advertising jungle in our offices here. Stew the exotic, as they say, in the hope that I can interest Netflix in a series. Right, that said, joining us weekly live from New York, again, is the fabulous Siobhan O'Connell, formerly a media and advertising journalist with the Irish Times and the Sunday Business Post, and a founder of the great Business Plus, Ireland's largest circulation, I think I'm right saying, Siobhan, monthly business magazine. And I know you hate me saying, so I won't say go ahead and buy a copy every week, despite the fact that I'm in it. I know you cringe. And I am Jay Adworld, have supported these sessions from the very start. Simply, without their support, this would not happen. So this is the great John McGee. And indeed, I should mention PR guru Sharon Plunkett, who was instrumental in this. So we have John McGee. Our Jack is his online persona. Swipe left is always the advice. He's the CEO of Irish Marketing Journal and the fabulous Adworld.ie, which goes out every Friday, which people do seek out. And I often forget to say a columnist with the Sunday Independent, no less. But one of the great advertising supporters. So Siobhan and Jack will contribute as we go. But we have two guests. So our two guests this week are Mark McCann, who's CEO at the Oliver Agency, which is a very different type of agency to what a lot of us maybe would understand and that I used to love. But maybe we'll talk about that because it is a very different model, although I know people know Oliver very well. We were to have from the other type of traditional agency, David Hayes of Wave, the MD of Wavemaker, which is part of Group M, but he got caught up in new business, which, to be fair, he did warn us about at the very start that it could happen, and we wouldn't deny him that. We have Richard Bogie, who's live, actually really is live, from somewhere near Edinburgh, about 25 miles away. Richard is the MD at News Ireland and I think News Scotland, formerly with the Express newspapers, formerly with the London Independent, and formerly with the Scotsman. So you're all very, very welcome. So Mark, firstly, can we just turn to you and maybe you can just try and explain a little bit about the Oliver model, how it works, what it is, and how you're getting on during the virus, because I would think Oliver is very much in-house in that sense. So maybe just tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Stuart. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I suppose, look, for us at the moment, we're similar to most other agents in terms of we've seen contraction across our business and across certain industry sectors. For example, tourism and hospitality, and then obviously aviation as well have been badly affected. But I think at the moment, our focus really is on helping our brands pivot their message in line with the sensitivities around consumer consent, etc., and trying to do it in a way that shows empathy. The business, in terms of moving off-site, I'll just get into the off-site in a minute, but I think at the moment, obviously, we've seen a massive pivot in terms of our teams doing more on the digital content and social-led strategy side of the business. So there's been a move to that, obviously, over the past few months. And, you mentioned there about consumer behavior and the flux and the, accessibility and intelligence at the moment around what consumers are thinking and where they may be going in the future. I think that's important that we keep our clients up to date with that information. So, from an agency perspective, that's where we are right now as a business. In terms of our model, I think it's important to talk about, when we talk about, in-house, in my opinion, in-housing is a mindset. It's not necessarily a location. So, when we look at the industry at the moment in terms of, we're hearing words like agile, flexible, adaptable, collaborative, etc. I think that's been part of our DNA from day one when Simon Martin, who was the original founder of Oliver, looked at the industry and saw an opportunity for a much more trusted and transparent model that gave a lot more flexibility and collaboration to clients. So, the idea of putting people on site it's a culture, it's a way of working, it's an operating model, and it's a way people can genuinely collaborate. And as we've moved into a lockdown phase in our own business, I think, because of those relationships and the true depth of those relationships that we've had with those clients by working side by side for such a long period of time with them, it's been seamless from our perspective. And it really enabled us to help those people get through this and grow and survive, and in some cases come up with some really, really good creative ideation and creative ideas for them. I think every business at the moment has had to be creative at this time in terms of how to do things, but I think the agency industry, in terms of the traditional industry, has been forced into new ways of working, have been forced to look at, working from home and to become more agile and accessible and collaborative and look at new ways of working. So I think from an Oliver perspective, the in-housing model was already there. We were already delivering that across multiple channels, multiple disciplines. So from our point of view, I think it hasn't really affected us in terms of our ability to work closely with our clients and deliver great work.
Tell me something, Mark, as well. You're part of you and Mrs. Jones so globally as well. Is there collaboration going on at that level too?
Yeah, well, look, you and Mr. Jones.
They're a brand tech family, aren't they?
Yeah, you look. Yeah, I think from our point of view, we've been looking for a partner for some time. And I think, what Oliver brings to the table is that, accessibility and flexibility around how we work creatively and from a digital perspective. I think with you and Mr. Jones, which is owned by David Jones, was set up back in 2015. Yeah. Ex-Havas was looking at technology and the way technology could be integrated better and automated in a way that would really allow brands to drive really great content at pace across the globe, not just at local levels. And they went out and invested strategically in some great businesses. We were lucky enough to become one of their members of their family last January. And what it's done is it's opened us up to huge opportunities around automation and digital content ideation. And I think it's brought us to the next level in terms of our capabilities and what we can do as a business. I think plugging in the technology we already had and plugging in their technologies has really opened up huge opportunities for us. And we've seen that with the likes of Unilever and UStudio. We're now in 24 countries with them, building out incredible content and creative content for them across the globe. But I think the synergies and the integration of those two businesses and the accessibility we have as a global, network. I think one of the things that came to mind was is that we've quite a nimble network partnership arrangement in place. So we're on calls constantly with all the leaders around the world. And as we come into lockdown, I think our businesses have become a lot closer and a lot tighter. We share a lot collaboratively. We share great ideas. We share, regularly, which is fantastic to be able to share that then at a local level with our own client bases. So you, Mr. Jones, is an incredible business. Plugging Oliver into that business has really allowed us to become, a global leader in that space.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd be first and foremost in saying that the future is technology, and technology getting in the middle. Richard, hello. How are things?
Yeah,
how are
good,
things at News Ireland, particularly? Sunday cover sales. You might talk about that, midweek sales. Presumably, you're seeing a drop in advertising revenue, I would think.
So yeah, I mean, good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here. Yeah, News Ireland is a publishing business, a news publishing business, as we all know. So we've got the Irish Sun, the Sunday Times, and the Times in Ireland, which is a digital edition, Monday to Saturday. But we also have the Times International edition. And I think the big levers of our business around copy sales and audience generation, and obviously advertising and commercial revenues. What we've seen is a shift of consumption. So rather than seeing the collapse that we feared at the onset of this crisis, what we've seen is a shift in consumption patterns. So print is holding up okay Monday to Friday numbers. In fact, we've seen Friday coming back quite strongly over the last 2 or 3 weeks. But Monday to Friday numbers have changed as consumption patterns have moved. So obviously the big commuter routes, airports, stations, bus terminuses, petrol stations in some cases on main arterial roads, those have settled back to a number that you'd expect to see as a result of changing movement. But because of home working and shopping near domestic locations, we're actually seeing that the smaller stores, the convenience stores, the corner shops, the local petrol forecourts are starting to pick back up again and are enjoying stronger numbers. So we've had to respond to that and have put in place things like a home delivery scheme in Dublin, for example, that has added extra sales and kept that part of the business strong and resilient. What we have seen, very interestingly, is that the weekends are returning to, on Saturday, we're getting very near, and in some cases up on pre-COVID sales levels. And Sundays have been extraordinary, where the Sunday Times in particular is well up and has been well up on pre-COVID sales levels, because we think of two things. One, it's a very strong brand with great loyalty. Two, people want, well, three things, and two, people want something to do with the time that they have at home, and it presents you with a long read that you can consume not just on the day, but during the week. And three, we've been adding lots of extra content in there. So you may have seen a series we've run called The Children's Times that we put into place very quickly to help parents and families with homeschooling and ways to talk to their primary school children about what was happening to them and why they were socially distanced from their friends. We added a wine guide in a few weeks ago because we thought that parents needed something to justify the inordinate amounts of alcohol they were drinking. So we added that in, and that did very well. And last weekend we had a celebration of 25 years of rugby, of Irish rugby in Europe, and that added sales as well. So we're seeing good sales there. And digitally, our audiences are moving much more into online consumption. Irishsun.ie is going up in traffic, and surprisingly, you might think things like entertainment, showbiz, sport, those are maintaining their levels before, despite the fact that the content is very, very light. That ability to write more stories about how football may or may not return, how competitions and promotions and so forth will be resolved, that has attracted a huge amount of interest. And the final part of our audience business is of course, subscriptions. And on the Times products, we have a hard paywall on our digital access. And we've seen the trial rates since the beginning of COVID have actually tripled. So trial rates are now running at 3 times what they were before. But reassuringly, the conversion levels to those trials remain at the high 80%. Wow. And our churn out of subscription is reassuringly low. So despite, yes, you're right, some of the advertising impacts have been noticeable in our business. There's no question. The advertising, in particular in print, took a bit of a downturn, but is now starting to come back, and we're seeing some reassuring green shoots of recovery there. But the audience and other revenue streams have held up well, and in particular, our digital advertising has maintained a good strong presence as that consumption has gone up from the audience.
And can I just, well, I have you on that subject about the digital surge versus cover sales. You were in the news this week, and I want to turn to Jack in a second. You were in the news this week about ABC.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe explain that about the ABC audit?
Yeah. So
and the counting.
Yeah, we moved to a private audit system. The press releases in the market. We moved to a private audit system as of this month, which does mean that figures are available to agencies and remain in place in the trading marketplace. But those figures, therefore, can still be used in the marketplace. But we felt it was the right thing to do to move to a private audit situation whereby we're able to focus the narrative around our business much more in the future about our audiences across all platforms. So that's a move that we've made. And I think you've seen other publishers also start to look at ABC and how they want to engage with that. But rest assured that that number is still audited in the same way that it was before, with the same quality and kite mark of ABC on it, and is available to agencies in the trading marketplace.
Jack, can I turn to you, because I know you have a view on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a move that's been on the cards for a while. A number of news publishers have withdrawn from ABC over the last 18 months. I think here in Ireland, we've I&M, Telegraph in the UK. There's been a few. I think it puts an end to the narrative that newspapers are in decline once and for all. Which is kind of frustrating for anybody, I suppose, working in a news organisation. Yes, newsprint has been on decline for a long time. That's not new. That's as old as the hills. But the reality is that people are moving online, and perhaps the news industry needs to do more to actually promote this message that this is where the action is at. Okay, yes, print is still there, and there will be people who will continue to buy print for lots of different reasons, including advertisers and agencies want to see their copy in a print format. But the reality is more and more people are consuming online, and have been for the last 10 15 years. And so I get frustrated when I read stories about the continual demise of print, and and it's that narrative's probably suited maybe media agencies who've used it as a tactic to beat up media owners on price or in their trading strategies or whatever. And it's also fed into the I suppose the Trump narrative of declining print and the fake news and all this chronology. But the reality is, if you look around the world, at any of the great newspaper organizations, whether it's News UK, whether it's New York Times, Guardian, their online readership is going through the roof, and that's a fact. So I think it's a good thing, that we're now. It's also a bit of it's a compromise as well, because I think from ABC's point of view, it was looking at a huge raft of defections probably over the coming 12 or 18 months, and so the private audit I think is a good move. It's a compromise by ABC, but it's a good move, I think, in general by news publishers.
But you're basically saying that from an ABC point of view, that if you buy a newspaper, the printed version, you are in effect a subscriber, and on digital you're a subscriber. So what we're saying now is we're going to count both. Isn't that the principle?
Yeah, exactly. Does it really matter? I mean, if I buy, there are times I go and I buy the Sunday Times and I buy the Indo on a Sunday morning, right? But if I don't want to if I couldn't be bothered leaving my house, I read the Sunday Times on my iPad. I read the Sunday Indo on my iPad. So it's I'm a consumer of the brand. Does it really matter?
Yeah, I know, absolutely, and I agree with you. I think a subscriber is a subscriber. Siobhan, do you have a view on that by any chance?
Yeah, I do. I mean, Business Plus we've always been audited.
ABC.
As a month, yes, always. We started publishing in 1998, and from our very first issue, we've had our circulation audited. And our view is it's incredibly important because it gives our advertisers certainty, it gives credibility to our product, and it gives you cut through, particularly maybe in the magazine market, maybe more so than in the newspapers. Just to go back to what John was saying, ABC for a number of years has audited print and online. So you are able to produce data that shows your print circulation and your online figures. And primarily those ABC figures are used for trading. So, you know, they're used for when people like me are dealing with advertising agencies, dealing with advertisers, I'm able to say, this is my circulation. This is my, so whether or not, you know, I actually don't think it'll make any difference that it's now private, because the key recipient of that data are the ad agencies and the advertisers anyway. It's not really necessary for the populace at large in the main, but I think it's a good move. I think it'll bring further, hopefully it'll keep publishers in the ABC, which is important, because, you know, the advertising audience need that. But also I would say on this, you know, advertising agencies have said for a long number of years, oh, it's all that really matters are the paid for copies, be it full price copy or be it a subscriber copy. But that's, you know, they then apply a different metric, if you like, to when they're buying online. So when you're buying online, if you're buying on Google or you're buying on Facebook, the content that you're buying to place your ads around is free anyway. So they seem to have a different, if you like, approach for newspapers and magazines, saying they place a higher value on the paid for copy as opposed to online, where a lot of it is free. And at the end of the day, you know, all publishers are trying to get their product in front of as many eyeballs as possible, relevant, targeted eyeballs for their advertiser that gives value to their advertiser. And, you know, so I think that's a question maybe going forward as to the premium that the ad agencies are placing on the full paid for copy in the news publishing business.
Okay, yep, I think that's fair too. Okay, so moving along, and particularly for Mark to start with, as the first question really is about what they call in-housing. In-housing is advertisers doing it themselves. The Association of American Advertising Agencies came out with more than 60% of their members are now doing it themselves. It does seem to be a surge. We've had the experience recently here of Air going direct, which was Aircom, as we knew, a large advertiser. And I know, and you do too, there are a few others in the pipeline. So Mark, that suits you, does it? Or do you see that going on?
Well, I think from a media perspective, it's not an area that we're really directly involved in, but I think from talking to clients around the frustrations at times they have, you know, we've seen the reports over the last number of years. We saw the one with the ANA in the US about 6 years ago. We've seen PwC's report last month. So I think brands in general are just frustrated and at the lack of transparency at times around the value and the return on investment that they're receiving from the spend. And ultimately, it's their money they're putting into the pot. And I think, you know, in many cases, a lot of them are trying to take back control. They've done that through, you know, in-housing and taking some of the programmatics in-house. But they're also, you know, doing a lot more directly with publishers as well. So, you know, publishers now are in a situation where, you know, they own their own content. So, you know, they're able to work a lot closer and a lot more directly with the publishers and drive real value and real engagement for themselves from that point of view. You know, I think there's more and more channels and there's more options around paid, owned, earned, and brands have moved away from paid in a lot of cases and are doing a lot more organic and investing heavily in the creative element of that and the production quality of that organic content that they're trying to deliver.
Come to that in a minute.
Yeah, and you know, I think they want the ability to be able to react quicker to the market. You know, they want to be able to go into the market quickly with really good, relevant content. And at times, I don't necessarily think the process allows that to happen for them, and they don't perceive that they're getting a real quick turnaround around that piece. And I just think the agencies and publishers, you know, they have to adjust their behaviours. They have to share some of the savings directly. They've got to be a lot more transparent and be a lot more upfront with the brands around, you know, the possibility of what they can deliver for them. And that's my reading, but really from talking to brands in general and you know, if you think there's
I
any
think
value in
advertisers
that.
also want to save the margin, the agency margin, and also media owners want to save the agency margin, especially now, Richard, when things are a bit tighter. Jack, do you have a view on this regarding agencies particularly? Is it a threat to agencies? Is it a...
I think if you're looking at the whole in-housing model in general, you have to look at the context and what's going on in the industry. The industry, advertising industry, and when I say that industry, I'm talking about both media and creative. It's been in a, I suppose, state of flux for the last number of years. The business models that agencies operate to, you could argue that they're no longer fit for purpose. They're
Correct.
The business model hasn't really changed in 40, 50 years. There's competition coming from the likes of the in-houses like Oliver, and there's a few other agencies in the States who are involved in it, right? And you look at the consultancies like Deloitte and Accenture. So there's huge competition out there, and I think it's post-COVID, it's all to play for. I think it's, even Richard, it will admit, News UK has its own in-house agency, Pulse Creative, so that's I think it's been effectively run with News UK and a collaboration of WPP agencies, but it's an in-house agency that manages all the group's creative and media planning and buying. So, if an organization the size of News UK can, deems that it's the future, and also interestingly is that WPP thinks this is a good idea as well, because they historically, I suppose, as a group, resisted or poo-pooed the idea of in-housing taking off to any great extent. So, I think as I said, post-COVID, it's all to play for, and budgets are going to be tight. Marketers are going to have to look for a clear ROI, and that feeds back into the whole case for marketing, and how marketing needs to justify itself going forward. But in terms of what's going to go on in agency land, it's going to become extremely competitive, extremely cutthroat, and as I said, it's all to play for.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jack, but I know you forgot to talk about Admatic and AdTech and the way that works in the middle as well.
Yeah, well, there is. If you look
technology is the answer to it. And I'm talking about as well you and Ms. Johnson.
But if you look at the last global downturn, lots of companies started out after recession, and new ways of doing things, new behaviors were embraced. So it's entirely conceivable that businesses like Admatic will thrive in the future, once budgets are cut back, and once people emerge from, I suppose, the fog of uncertainty that's going on at the moment, and get back to.
Yeah, I think it's important though, just that we recognize, in-housing as a model drives efficiency and cost effectiveness, and at times can be looked at as a cheap option. I think the challenge for businesses and in terms of the last 14 years while we developed the model, it's about creativity. It's about high-end creativity. It's about having the top best talent you possibly can in your business. So I think people need to get away from the idea that in-housing and that particular model doesn't drive creativity. It drives excellent creativity and efficiency. I think not only our business, but that's been proved by the amount of brands that want to work with us, the amount of brands that we're actually having conversations with globally now about integrating solutions into their business. But ultimately, what clients want, they want the flexibility to be able to change and adapt depending on when markets are, consumer sentiment is, and to do that really quickly and cost effectively. And that's fundamentally what the industry has struggled with over the last 10 to 14 years.
Yeah, and Mark, I'll get to, because we have two questions of creativity, but the other thing technology is, remember, it's 365, 24/7. And also when you've got margins, as we talked about on this Zoominar last week, of at least 49% of programmatic, there's a lot of margins going out in the middle. Richard, do you want to just talk about your own setup there briefly?
Yeah. Well, a couple of observations first. One is I think these moves in industry are cyclical. As you said there earlier, John, the last big recession, 2007, 2008, saw a big move towards in-housing, which then one should never underestimate the versatility and creativity in the agency community that responded very positively, found a new argument for and proposition for clients, and came back very strongly through the early era of the decade that we've just seen finish. So that's the first thing. These things will be cyclical. Secondly, it's to use the expression Mark used earlier, it's a state of mind, and it requires flexibility on both sides of the table, the in-housed as well as the in-houser, and thirdly, I think you need to be really careful if you just look at the inputs in terms of cost and look at it as a cost exercise. Mark again is absolutely right. You need to look at the outputs in terms of creativity, quality of service, and what you derive from that in-source service. From our point of view, yes, John, you're absolutely right. We have the Pulse, which is a resident in-house creative team that's run by Johnny Hornby's team from the AND agency, and they do a great job for us. We need to make sure that we don't replace one set of costs to an agency with another set of fixed costs in terms of floor space and occupancy and so forth. So we really focus on the quality of the output, and they've created some magnificent brand campaigns and are very versatile across a number of different media. And in fact, as the two businesses I run also run a mixture of in-house and in-sourced, sort of outsourced services. So for example, we have PR agencies in Scotland and Ireland. We don't in London. We have an in-house agency. And so sometimes you end up in an interesting hybrid situation where you're working across a number of different solutions to deliver the service. But the key thing is focusing on the output.
Absolutely right. Siobhan, do you want to say something on this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the in-housing model that we've been talking about there provides huge value to the clients if they have them on site to be able to turn to things as and when they need them, as opposed to having to put in a call and wait 3 days to get a response. But also, I think there has to be some caution though when you talk about clients thinking they can do it themselves. They can't. You know, clients who might say, well, you know what, we're going to retrench now because this whole pandemic, and we're going to start doing all our advertising ourselves. The example you referred to earlier, do our own media buying, do our own creative. That won't work. That is not a solution going forward. I mean, we've seen companies who've tried it, and they're slowly now going back to having either an in-housing agency or an outside media buying creative agency on record. I mean, I see it day in, day out when I'm dealing with advertisers who might not have any ad agency resource whatsoever, and it just doesn't work, because you're dealing with them on graphics, you're dealing with them on images, you know, they just don't have an understanding as to what in the simplest things that are required in terms of artwork, never mind complicated media planning across different media. So I think that's one thing that, you know, agencies, full service agencies and in-housing, and, you know, more so full service agencies can address that themselves by perhaps readjusting their own cost basis going forward, so that clients don't feel, okay, that's way too expensive. The agency model needs to be addressed, but there's still a requirement for the ad agency.
Well, I agree with you, but only to a point. But I think the first thing that's going to go in that breakup is media buying. Not, you can still pay the agency for media planning, and there's lots of creative shops around to do the creative work, but we're just really...
I'm not sure. I mean, I think what Oliver does is, you know, Oliver is a really good example of someone who can go in and help you with all your
absolutely.
All this stuff. And I think clients who think that they can do all that media buying themselves, I'm not wholly convinced about that.
Okay.
Can I just add one last thing on the subject of that? And I want to pick up on something that Siobhan said. There's a danger when you in-house, that you take something from a business that has 100% of what they do is the specialist area in, let us say, media buying. It could be PR, it could be legal services, it could be anything. And their job, therefore, is to develop and grow talent, to innovate and create a competitive advantage in that market, and grow and sell their skills in that particular key space. I have seen several examples before, of where in-house services neglect all those things because they're just a 10% of the business. They're a small part of what the business does, and the skills development, the innovation, the creativity, and the knowledge growth withers away over a number of years. And that capital that you get from the agency expertise, which is their creative point of difference, is not replaced by an in-house service that gradually over years, at first you can think it's doing a great job, but over 2 or 3 years you can end up in a situation where actually you've lost that knowledge and expertise, and it settles into a subpar performance.
I hear you, Richard. We talk about creativity just very, very quickly, but
just to add to what Richard was saying,
I think the first one is media. Pardon? Sorry, Siobhan. Yes, go ahead.
What Richard was saying there, Stuart. I mean, you know, I think personally, it's the Oliver in-housing model. That is what is going to be the future if you're looking at how the agency business is going to be restructured.
And technology.
Yeah, I think just on Richard's point, you know, there's two elements. There's in-housing and there's an on-site. So the in-housing in some cases is where, you know, the business employs those people themselves. And you're right, it can lead to, you know, a level of a lack of creativity or a lack of process. And additional costs. I think the on-site model is really where we put in the talent that's required at any given time. And if that changes, if the strategy changes, if the business needs to go in a different direction, if they want to reposition the brand, we change and we flex and we adapt that team to meet that. So there's a constant, revolving door of talent to fit the specific requirement of that client. I think that's the key function here. You know, you don't want people to go stale. You want people to go into these situations and be really, really, motivated to do a great job. And I think that's partly what we do. We move people around the business regularly. You know, as the client adapts and changes their strategy and looks at their planning process and changes it around, we develop and we change our teams in line with that to try and keep that fluidity and keep that kind of energy there as well.
Mark, there's 2 questions, and I'll just go back to you if I can. One is from Andy May saying, although in-house creative and production is suiting our circumstances during COVID-19, when does the panel believe clients and agencies will demand the high level of creativity, technical expertise and high production values that really are required to build brands in the future? And also Aisling White from ICAD said, what is Mark McCann's opinion on awards this year? ICAD have reduced our fee from €200 down to €25. That's an ad. And will exhibit commended work in a bespoke exhibition in November. But the focus there is on COVID-19 and on creativity. And I know Rory Hamilton of Boys and Girls was giving out that Cannes was going to be closed because the standard of creative work, Cannes are saying standard creative work this year isn't good, because to be honest with you, the world does not need another commercial of people doing funny things at home to an Al Green soundtrack saying let's stick together, like, you know.
Yeah, look, you know, we have to quickly absorb the lessons that COVID-19 has given us, and many of which are on the table for a long time already around the agency structure. You know, what's clear from the collective experience, the pandemic, it's only accelerated the trends that we've been talking about here. You know, we're, you know, agile, fit for purpose workforces, tech-led and e-commerce solutions. There is potentially a new model for the new marketing that will come out of this pandemic, or pandemic, as our friend was calling it at one point. In terms of creativity, you know, it's about the people. At the end of the day, you know, for me, the power of the industry still rests in its people. But if you can get the right mix of people, process, and technology, you can deliver real change and deliver great award-winning work. And I think that's what people need to consider. You know, let's not focus on the traditional way that we've worked in the past. Let's focus on the new ways. You know, we've all been forced into a situation where we've had to work differently. You know, some people will argue that the creative that's come out of that hasn't been fantastic. But from a client's perspective, you know, they're seeing really efficient, effective work delivered quickly. Okay, it may not be to the highest standards that we've seen in the past, but at the same time, they may not want to go back to the old ways of working. And we need to understand that. We need to try and understand how we will build a solution around how we support the new ways of working that they may require. Yeah. And to John's point, and I think you mentioned it before, you know, we're still in recession. Budgets are tight. You know, agencies, we're still on the discretionary spend list, unfortunately, across all global businesses. So, you know, adding value and adding flexibility and doing really good work really effectively and cost effectively, efficiently for clients will be important for the next 6 to 7 months as we come out of this. So I think let's not focus on good or bad creative. Let's focus on doing a bloody great job for our clients and help them get their brands back selling more products to consumers.
I think as well that close social collaboration, what we used to call in McCann's blood on the walls, of having teams working together and everything else, that's been lost a little bit in the pandemic. Just a quick question for you, Mark, before I go to John. Do you think the ICAD exhibition should go ahead this year?
Yeah, I've received an email on that. So yeah, we will, yes, why not? You know, like I think we've got to understand that, you know, the people who work in the business are talented, creative people. They've suffered. They're in lockdown, you know, collaborative. They're not having those face-to-face interactions that we all like to see them having. They're not speaking directly with the clients in the same way they would have in the past. But I think they're still doing great work, and we need to encourage and we need to support them at this time, and we need to celebrate the fact that they've been able to pivot, and they've been able to really find ways to come up with meaningful ways to spread the brand's messages. You know, they may have been muted messages, they may have been quite restrictive in terms of the way they position them, but that's the environment we're in right now. And we have to, you know, ultimately, I think we'll come out of it. I think we're going to see a lot more positivity around the messages coming out based on the fact that the government has given us this stepped process. So there's a measured approach being taken in terms of how we come out of this. And I think the message will be similar.
Very good. Jack?
Question.
Huh?
What's the question?
Well, creativity and ICAD. Is it worth having? Because again, Rory, I think you reported on that actually. Rory Hamilton.
Rory Hamilton wrote a piece for us in Adworld there last week, and it was a very good piece. You know, the thing about creativity, it doesn't go away. You don't put creativity in hibernation for a number of months, or, you know, while COVID's. Creativity offers, you know, all kinds of potential for industries to reboot. And I think we need creativity more than ever. Now, Cannes decision, the Accentual's decision, the owner of Cannes, to close Cannes for 2020, I think that was purely a commercial decision rather than anything else, and rightly so.
But they said it was for the lack of creativity. I think that was what Rory was.
Well, I don't think I think they was probably being a bit disingenuous with that. I think it was a commercial decision that was made at the end of the day. Creativity is the lifeblood of our industry, across not just advertising, but also in media as well. I mean, creativity and innovation is what we do, and you know, it should be celebrated. You cannot put it in a jar and put it at the back of the press until everything is over. As I said, we need creative thinking now more than ever. But on you know, the one of the things that I would worry about is, you know, post-COVID, I think we're looking at a prolonged period of short-termism, you know, and that's the nemesis of creativity in many ways, because brands will be looking at rebooting and getting their products and back on the consumer shopping list. And, you know, there'll be, you'll see sales, you'll see retailers going out of business, you'll see, you know, as I said, a lot of more short-term strategic campaigns, which, you know, they're not good if you want to build brands. So I think, you know, for the foreseeable future, I think we're stuck with short-termism. You know, I think obviously the industry will take anything they can get at the moment, whether it's short-term or long-term. But ultimately, you know, the conversation will have to be had with clients, and at some stage going forward about the need for, you know, consistent quality brand building, and that, again, creativity plays a huge role in that. Richard, do you want to add to that, or Siobhan, do you want to add to that?
Siobhan,
Richard, you go.
Okay, well, I think that the two additional points I'd like to make are, firstly, awards are a great showcase for the industry as a whole, and we need to be showing as much as we can the positive impact that advertising has on business growth and generation, and goodness knows we're going to need that when we come out of that recession. So that's one very strong argument, I believe, for awards, regardless of the levels of creativity, and that subjective argument that's being made. As a whole, the advertising industry needs to be celebrated and putting itself on the front foot as a driver of economic growth. And the second point is that clients who have the confidence to advertise through crises and recessions need to be praised and congratulated, and they will reap their rewards, because there are numerous pieces of research that show that brands that continue to advertise through recessions emerge stronger than those that don't. So I would see those two reasons as being very strong reasons to continue with, whether it's ICAD or CANS, who I think Jack is absolutely right. It's probably an economic decision around the business of that event, but I think awards should continue and should give us the opportunity to celebrate both clients' investment and the advertising industry.
Just on that, I meant to add, Stuart, about the media awards this year. I've been asked this question several times over the last month. As everybody knows, the media awards were due to run on the 12th of March. And we took a decision 3 days beforehand just to cancel them. And we're glad that we did so, and it was the right decision to make. And the alternative could have been our Cheltenham moment. But we consulted with the industry, and so the media awards are tentatively scheduled to take place at the end of November. We haven't made a decision on whether they will go ahead. We will consult the industry closer to the date. We would like them to go ahead, but we would also be guided by, public health guidelines in terms of what is fit and if there's an appetite, and if they're done and dusted, they're in the box, the winners have been decided and everything like that. So we'll make a decision closer to probably the end of September about so.
Okay, good. Siobhan, do you want to add anything to it?
No, I just think the same way that advertising matters, the name of this whole webinar, awards matter. And, now more than ever, people need a little bit of good news. They need to be slapped on the back when they've done good work. And, I think it's good for morale. I think it's good for morale in the industry. And I think it shows that the industry is moving forward and, just getting on with it. So I think, yeah, of course there should be awards.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much indeed. We're just going to run until about 5 past because we started a bit late to give people a chance to come on. Could I just go around the table and kind of succinctly, can we just talk about the state of the market? I mean, obviously there's what we talk about every single week is mergers and acquisitions, but just can we get a sense, everybody wants to know when we're coming out, when the ad business will bounce back. Can we just get a sense of the state of the market, where we're at now and what the future holds for us? If we could. Richard, do you want to have a go at that?
Okay, so I think let's take our own example. We've seen from the triage of the first couple of weeks where we were trying to stop the bleeding, as it were, and get our business stabilized. Yes. We've gone through the next cycle in what I think is a 4-step stage, where we stabilized the business, got everybody working from home, performed the daily miracle of getting our papers out and our websites up and running with 5 people in the office instead of 100. We then got into a sort of normalized, abnormal business as usual type environment, and now we're on the front foot, thinking creatively about the future, planning. Okay. The next quarter, the next year. The budget cycle drives that thinking. But I think a lot of businesses are starting to do that too. And we're finding that engagements in commercial briefs and opportunities to talk about promotions and marketing activity, editorial ideas are starting to open up and look at a longer term. So our business definitely is beginning to see green shoots of what the future could look like. Don't get me wrong, it's going to take a long time to normalize anything. But I would say that we are positive about the future, in particular because advertising is a lead economic indicator. So we'll know looking backwards once we're 6 months into the recovery, because advertising revenues will have told us that. And we think that therefore, in the next 12 to 18 months, we'll start to see some numbers that are starting to look encouraging based on the sort of activity that we're discussing now. And based on the things that everybody's talked about: creativity, agility, strong brands to attract audiences, and commercial activity. So a different world for sure, but one that I'm sure will have learnt lessons from this global crisis.
But a bit more positive. As you say, advertising is the first thing to get switched on, but it's also the first thing to get switched off, which is the problem. Siobhan, do you want to just talk about the state of the market? And do you want to comment on that maximum media RTE story, which appeared in the Business Post on the front page. No, and I know Justin Cullen, we wish him well because he left Core, as you know, chairman of Maximum Media, and they've hard times ahead of them. And in fact, I know John wrote about Maximum Media in the Sindo on Sunday. But do you want to just comment on that and the state of the market?
Yeah, I think just on the Maximum Media, I mean, Aaron Rogan has been leading the way in his coverage on Maximum Media in the Sunday Business Post. We do terrific work week in, week out. Story he had on Sunday was saying that RT had made an offer of 12 million, between 10 and 12 million for a 49% share of Maximum Media. But Niall McGarry turned it down. Now, I don't know, but I have an awful lot of hats, and I would argue that I would eat all of my hats if Niall McGarry had turned down 10 to 12 million. I could be, wrong, but I think it's an awful lot of money for a stake in a media company to be rebuffed. I think also what struck me as unusual about the story was RTE is a semi-state organisation. It's never made an outside acquisition, to the best of my knowledge, since it was established. So it would have been a first.
No, and not just that, especially coming at a time when they were looking for redundancy, selling off pieces of Montrose, making salary cuts, blah, blah, blah. It seemed an odd kind of a story,
Yeah, I think one thing I would say also on Maximum, the audience that Maximum was going after, this young lad, young male kind of audience, I think perhaps Maximum has been overtaken by technology as well. So when it first started, there weren't that many online opportunities for advertisers to get through to that audience. But now, in a lot of cases, advertisers can bypass the publisher to get to that audience by going directly to the Facebooks, to the Googles, to the YouTubes. So they don't necessarily have to use the third-party intermediary of a publisher like Maximum to get to that specific young male audience. So that would be something I think I would, that would be my view on that. It has been overtaken to some extent by technological developments.
Yes, in fact, I have the story here in front of me. It's quite a long story. But can you just very briefly, because I'm conscious of time, just in a sentence, can you give it just kind of a view of the state of the market? Are we going to see more Maximum Medias? Are we going to see more mergers and acquisitions? Is that what's going to happen, particularly on the media owner side? And on the agency side as well? I'll come to Jack about that.
Any economic downturn will always provide opportunity for mergers and for acquisitions. I don't think we're going to see them immediately, because I think a lot of companies are going to have to be, they're going to be battening down the hatches, getting their own ducks in a row, and getting some clarity of where they are themselves. And then maybe come Q3, when they have that, when they're settled down, as Richard said, things have plateaued a bit for them, and they kind of get a view of the landscape going forward and how their businesses are projected. Then they'll look around and say, okay, hang on a second, where are the opportunities here? There's always opportunities in a downturn.
Jack, have you a view?
Yeah, well, in the agency space, I think certainly there's scope for, particularly amongst the smaller independent agencies. But the problem is with owner-managed businesses, the expectations, there's a big disconnect with reality. And, so a vendor in his 50s, 60s has a particular price in mind when it comes to the valuation of the business. But in reality, that price is far removed from reality. And it's also the cultural issues that have to be overcome in any kind of merger. So, and I do believe that there are a number of companies out there who would be interested in this space, but whether they do it or not, I don't know. In media, yes, there's definitely, I've said this before, there's definitely a case for consolidation in the marketplace, and I see it particularly in print and probably radio. In terms of online, no. But again, a lot of this boils down to the competition authority, and approval is ultimately required from the minister. And I don't see anybody rushing out to merge or rushing out to acquire anybody just yet. And that may happen, post-COVID or in 2021. But at the moment, I think everybody's batting down the hatches, looking at their own cost base, and they're not going to be splurging out ridiculous money on acquiring a competitor that's going through hard times. So
Absolutely right. Mark, can I leave you with the last word on this? So what's your view on the state of the market and indeed all this talk of mergers and acquisitions and fallovers and everything else?
I think, you know, from our own perspective, we're really trying to anticipate the levels of recovery we might see across categories and to ensure kind of we support that from a client perspective, because at the moment, you know, it seems to the client, the customer sentiment and recovery seems to be based around a lot of, you know, the government's process here in terms of when they come back to the market. So we need to get confidence back in the market as quickly as possible. In terms of mergers and acquisitions, there's always vultures hanging around this, you know, during downturns and recessions who have, you know, cash and will look at potential acquisitions that fit with their particular model. And I think we may see some of that. I think the larger agency groups have already done an awful lot of consolidation over the last few months around bringing some of their businesses together and merging some of their global businesses into smaller units. So I think from John's point of view, in terms of the independence, obviously, like everybody else in Ireland, we want to see our independence. We want to see those people survive and get through this process. And a lot of that will be down to what the government decides to do in the next 3 to 4 months. And, you know, I think that message hasn't been very clear to any of the business community at this point, and we really need to get clarity around what that will look like and how that will be managed and measured from the point of view of accessibility from, you know, from all business aspects in terms of supporting them through this time. That will have a big part to play in you know, how well or how healthily, you know, our businesses and our industry comes out of this, you know, recession. I think that's key, and that's something that we all need to understand very quickly, and that will allow us to make a lot of decisions. You know, I think all of us have made, you know, tough decisions early on. You know, we've managed our fundamentals around our businesses very well, and if we can, you know, maintain our cash positions and hold on to that cash, we'll come at us in a strong position. And there may be opportunities in the marketplace for us around, you know, technology. I think e-commerce is going to be a big play for a lot of businesses, if coming up with end-to-end e-commerce solutions that can really plug into clients' brands. I think is an opportunity for agencies to look at doing that on a smaller scale, and driving rate efficiency would be great.
Okay, and we wish you very well. We wish everybody who sails in Oliver extremely well, Mark. Very grateful for you today. Richard, very grateful for you as well, News Ireland. We also wish, and I know you're part of News Brands and you're active in News Brands, but we wish you well. Next week we'll have Jane McDade from Think House, as I said. We'll also have Luke Reaper, who I know Jack will know has done an awful lot of work on consumer behaviour, and actually it's really interesting stuff. And we also have Mick McCaffrey from News and No Sport on Virgin Media. So we'll see you next week with Siobhan and with John McGee. So thank you ever so much. What we normally do is try and be as cool as we possibly can and just gently like do an advertising wave, you know, like we're good. Thanks ever so much. Thank you everybody who's watching. Appreciate it very much. We'll send the recording out. Thanks very much, guys.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.